Basic objective of this Java training is to ensure that you are aware about various type of applications that we create, which definitely includes enterprise applications, and also we have added now mobile applications using HTML5 and Java. To a certain extent, we will be talking about PhoneGap also, so that you can convert your mobile applications which can run on any phone. So basic objective of this session is to ensure that you are able to do all activities which are involved in development, which includes definitely developing applications, testing applications, debugging applications, deploying applications, monitoring applications, managing applications, right? So these are few important elements which makes this particular training program a program which will definitely help you to either sustain your job or to get a new job. So that's what is basic objective. Now, in brief, if I go ahead and if I discuss with you what will be the coverage. We will start up with fundamentals, in the sense some technologies which everyone need to be aware of, irrespective of whether it is Java, whether it is .NET, or whether it is anything which is related to systems, right? So for data, we will be going through XML, where we will extensively discuss about what XML is, what is the role of XML in enterprise applications, and specifically when it comes to integration of two or more than two diversified applications. So we'll cover here DTD, we'll cover here schema, we'll cover here XSL. Right? So these three makes you aware about how data is manipulated, how data is handled in enterprise applications. Then we'll go with some basic topics like HTML, yes, HTML5. We'll go through JavaScript in order to ensure that we are aware about object-oriented JavaScript. And today JavaScript is not a simple language, because you might have heard about various frameworks which are coming up, and JavaScript is even being used to talk to the native systems. So we'll talk about JavaScript, we'll make a foundation about JavaScript, and apart from JavaScript we'll be talking about some frameworks which are used in JavaScript in order to help you in coming up with good UI element of today, which is Web 3.0 compliant. Now once this is done, we will start with fundamentals of Java, and we are going to take up Java 7 and Java 8. Basic difference between Java 7, Java 8, how actually Java internally works, and how Java 8 has helped Java to be more lightweight as compared to Java 7. Now in Java, we'll be talking about all important topics, which includes collections, which includes object-oriented application design using Java, which includes multi-threading, which includes exception handling, which includes testing using Java using JUnit, right? So all that will be coverage of Java. At the end of the Java, which we will cover typically in 18 to 20 hours, we'll be doing a small project as well. Once Java is done, we will start with JEE, that is Java Enterprise Edition, and versions that we are going to use is 6 and 7. You know, like JEE 6 is already there, and JE7 is also now there, and there are certain application servers there which are actually now compliant with JE7 as well. So JE6, JE7, where we will talk about all layers. One of you already spoke about that. Typically web component development, EJB component development, transaction management, securing your Java and JE based applications. So specific emphasis on security and transaction management, and also design patterns, which are typically used in applications in various organizations. So design pattern is what is something which we will focus on. Now once you are done with this, we will definitely talk about whatever elements are required in order to help you in building an enterprise application. Containers that we are going to use here is JBoss. We will be using WAS, WebSphere Application Server. We'll be using WebLogic, and generic containers. Right? When we say generic containers, Glassfish also comes as part of it. Right? Because Glassfish is treated as a reference server, and now it is being used in production as well. So we'll be keeping in mind all these servers when we go and talk about deployment, security, transaction management, what are the differences when it comes to these features, how to administrate, do certain basic tasks on it, which includes installation, which includes configuration of data source, configuration of message-oriented middleware, configuration of transactions, configuration of security, how to configure LDAP server with your JE applications, right? So all this will be typical coverage of JE also. Now once JE is done, we will move into frameworks. And for each layer, we will be talking about one framework. For example, for web layer, we will be using Struts, 2.x. For service layer, we'll be talking about Sprinx and an introduction to Google Juice as well. For persistence layer, we have selected Hibernate because it is prominently used in persistence layer everywhere, and we'll talk about 3.x here. Right, so these are some of the frameworks which we will discuss in detail in order to ensure that you can power your application using these frameworks as well. Now once this is done, we will move to SOA, service oriented architecture. Whatever a Java professional need to know about SOA, that is what will be the agenda here. We will talk about integration patterns and how these integration patterns are implemented using various products which are there in market. Product that we have selected is Mule, right? But yes, depending on the need, we can change this product because we have capabilities of not only Mule but also Fuse. We have capability of Oracle SOA Suite, right? So depending on the need, we'll be going, but prominently as per our market research, Mule is what is picking up very fast. This is the reason why we have kept Mule as part of it. End of the program will be by again a project where you will be using all this, right? Now when we talk about integration pattern and Mule, we'll be discussing here web services as well. And web services of both types, that is SOAP-based web services and REST-based web services. So at the end of the program, you will be having all these capabilities in your profile, and probably this will be sufficient enough in order to help you in retaining or getting a job in this particular domain, right? So our emphasis will be on best practices, which is followed not only at this particular layer, but also when you write your Java programs, right? So Java program will also contain GOF pattern implementation, how actually GOF patterns are implemented, when to go with patterns, when to not go with patterns, what are the anti-patterns which are used here, right? So this is what is in brief agenda that we are going to follow for this particular training curriculum. Okay. Any confusion regarding agenda, you can definitely go ahead and ask me. Sabita, Sanjeev?
No.
Any confusion? Anything you wanted to ask on the agenda part?
What are GOF patterns?
It is gang of 4 actually. There were 4 people who contributed to.
They came up with the entire system of design patterns. Right?
Yes, absolutely right. They ensure that whatever patterns they are coming up with, it is following best object-oriented principles, right? So there are various best object-oriented principles which you need to follow when you are writing a program. GOF also did the same, and they wrote a book actually of design patterns. So in Java, we will be implementing their design patterns. Okay, fine. Right, now material that we will be using are standard materials because we do train people for Oracle. You can say one of our client is Oracle University as well. So we have access to their material, which we try to actually make available for our other trainees as well. So material will be something which will be from vendors directly. And if you see, this is what is the Java coverage. Writing your first Java program, Java application, creating a class, methods, error handling, exceptions, working with specialized classes, generics collections, IO fundamentals, console IO and file IO, multi-tied applications, multi-threaded applications. So this is what we are going to follow here. Now, apart from this, when it comes to EJBs, we will be using a different material. For example, this is for EJBs. This is specifically for EJB. This is what will be the coverage also. Introduction to Java Beans, EJBs, auction application, a case study, then session beans, entity classes, message driven beans, persistence logic, Java E application using messaging. Then we'll have interceptors, we'll have timers, we'll have exception handling, how actually exceptions are managed in containers, using timer, implementing security and best practices, right? And similarly, like when we go with web component development, we will have specific coverage for that, and we ensure that we are using standard material in this particular training in order to ensure that whatever we do, it is as per the certification requirement as well. So if you see here, we have Java EE component model, we have web component model, right? We have servlets in detail, we have JSP in detail, we have EJBs also as part of this, but EJBs we are covering extensively because need of distributed component is increasing, and when we move to web services, we will be able to relate how actually web services can be another model of distributed computing. We will discuss in what case we will go with EJBs, in what case we will go with web services as well, right? So this is what is the kind of material that we will be using in order to conduct this particular training. Same is the case with frameworks as well. We believe in documentation which is provided by vendors. We don't use certain slides which are already available. We directly use vendors material in order to ensure that scope of those frameworks are straight in front of you, right? So this is what is about material that we will be using. Assignment exercises will be as per the coverage, and each assignment will target a particular functional domain of activity. For example, when we talk about security, we will introduce you what is security. We'll talk about what is granular security. We will tell you what to secure, how to secure, what is level of security that can be specified, right? So everything will be case driven. That is what we are going to follow in the entire training, so that at the end of the training, you are aware about which technical element or what actually need to be used in what context, right? So this is what is brief about coverage and the material. Now what we are going to do, we are going to start off with a small short session on Java so that we can understand how actually training will be conducted, right? I'll not be using slides here because slides are something which helps us to depict static content, right? Now since this is first tuning session among us, I'll be preparing some notes and I'll be sharing it with you, right? So this is what is our objective. Now we are going to start up with the session, right? Fine. Now, actually, first thing that we need to understand here is history of Java. And why actually Java came into existence? What is the rationale behind Java? Now, if you see, Sun Microsystem was a company in which James Gosling was an architect who was working, right? Now, in electronic industry, there was a definite need which came up, and that need was each and every electronic device need to be automated, right? And for automation, they need to write code. Now, if you see, there are certain functionalities which are common across different devices. For example, switching on and switching off, right? Switch on and switch off. I'm just taking some basic functionalities, right? Switch on and switch off is something which is needed on all devices. But unfortunately, each vendor used to write programs specific to that device, right? Reason was because one device or program written for one device was not capable of getting executed in another electronic device, right? So they thought, since functionality is common, why can't we have an approach where we write program keeping in mind one device, and since functionality is common on other devices, why can't we use the same program in order to execute it and get the same functionality there? But there was a problem. Problem was each electronic device was made using different circuit, different layout, different component, different number of registers, different number of transistors, right? So they went to Sun Microsystem and they said, why can't you come up with a project where actually we can ensure that program written for one device, in case the functionality seems to be common on other devices, instead of rewriting that program again, we should be able to run it on other devices also. And this project was given to someone called as James Gosling. Right? He's also called as father of Java. Now James Gosling started doing his research. While doing research, he found out that problem is in hardware layout. Now, since program, once it gets submitted, is directly executing in actual hardware, since hardware components are different, obviously program's behavior will also be different, right? So he thought what can be done. And finally, he concluded that if we are able to hide the actual hardware from the application, we will be able to get the functionality by introducing something called as pseudo hardware, or by introducing a layer called as hardware abstraction layer, and by specifying a virtual machine so that programs, instead of directly executing in actual hardware, should execute in that virtual machine. And this actually worked out. This resolved the problem, right? So first feature of Java was platform independence. And how actually he got that platform independence? By introducing something called as virtual machine, right? Now this virtual machine was an hardware abstraction layer. Spelling mistakes will be there. I'll correct it, but you can also correct me sometimes. Hardware abstraction layer. And what was the objective of this hardware abstraction layer? Objective was hide the actual hardware and provide an execution environment. Right? This is what was the objective. Fine. In this way, actually, Sun Microsystem resolved that first issue, right? Of different platform trying to execute the same code. Right. Now this solution was found. But it's not that there were no other problems. There were other problems. And that problem was, what about memory? Because if I'm writing program keeping in mind a device which has, you say, 10 MB of memory, and when I go and execute it on a device which has 1 MB of memory, problem will be there, right? Why? Because if you see C, in C, if you're writing 100 lines of code, and if you're writing 200 lines of code, when you compile them, object codes will be of different size. And when they get loaded in primary memory, they need different amount of primary memory, right? So this was the usual behavior, how actually memory was used in case of program execution. Now this was another challenge which James Gosling has to fight with. How he resolved it? He said, fine, what I'll do is I'll work with a particular compression and decompression ratio. And he said that I will ensure that once code is compiled, instead of having different amount of memory requirement, amount of memory needed in runtime, he said that I will write a small program which will take responsibility of ensuring that irrespective of size of program, memory requirement to host that program in runtime will be similar, will be common, right? And this gave birth to something called as bytecode, right? So in case if you are compiling your program, when it goes and gets loaded, it will not require diversified amount of memory. Rather, it will require common amount of runtime memory in order to execute that program, right? And that particular compiled code is what is called as bytecode, right? Fine. So he said that he'll make a standard, say in order to make your applications as Java compliant, you need to have 1 MB of runtime memory, right? So irrespective of actual memory which is there in those hardware devices. If that device is Java enabled, it will always have the required amount of memory which will be common across different devices in order to run the program. Right? So with combination of virtual machine and bytecode concept and the way actually compiled code used to get loaded in common amount of memory on various devices, this project actually was completed. Name of this project was Oak, and this is what is first name of Java also. Sun Microsystem packaged it and started marketing it. But unfortunately, no one came forward to take it up. So finally it was shelved, right? But it has these two features. Now, around 1990s in Switzerland, there was a revolution called as WWW, which is World Wide Web. Now, you know what happens in WWW? In WWW, all systems across globe are connected. Why they are connected? They are connected to share data and services. And what are these services? These services are nothing but these are programs, right? Now, if I want to execute a program which is there on WWW, I need an execution environment on my system, right? So what is the way in order to ensure that all computers connected to WWW, irrespective of their hardware, irrespective of their memory, irrespective of their architecture which they have adopted, must execute in common way, right? Sun Microsystem understood the opportunity. They took out this language called as Oak and they said, fine, we already have the solution, and that solution is virtual machine, right? So third feature of Java you can say here, which was added by James Gosling and team, is they customized it to work or to run in WWW. And you know what actually runs your applications in WWW? It is browser, right? Whether it is yahoo.com or xyz.com, you interact with those applications using browser, right? So now challenge with Sun Microsystem was how actually they can make this virtual machine available in browser. They went to Microsoft, they went to Netscape and they said, we have created a small engine. If you make this engine part of your browser, entire world will be able to execute program written in this language in common way. Sanjeev, what will be reply of Microsoft? Do you feel they will agree? No. And that's what happened, right? Microsoft refused. So finally Sun tried its own hand and they came up with something called as browser of their own called as JavaSoft, or you say Sunsoft. Okay. But unfortunately there were very few takers of this browser. Meanwhile, Microsoft came up with something called as COM and DCOM component, right? And these components present in Internet Explorer actually made other browsers poor, and people started using Internet Explorer, right? All rest of them started losing market share. And that was the time when Netscape invited Sun and they said, we are going to take your virtual machine in our browser. They took it, they embedded it, and from there onwards, Java never looked back. And finally in 1992 or 93, Internet Explorer was forced to adopt virtual machine, right? So this is how actually Java came into existence after lots of struggle with already matured language market. Is that clear? Right. So three features of Java. One is platform independent, second is memory, and third is compliant to WWW, right? It can be embedded in browser in order to provide feature of platform independence, right? But applications were getting written, but people were not actually comfortable because they were concerned about security, right? So Java actually, Sun Microsystem came up with an ideology where they said all Java programs are 100% secure. And they gave this confidence to market by showing their internal architecture, how actually they have managed building up their virtual machine, right? So I'll write here as of now, Java is secure. Now, when it says secure from what? From virus. Secure from virus, so that threat to your code can be eliminated, and also secure from unauthorized users. Right? And how actually they made it secure from virus? Very simple. When Java code compiles, after compilation, when you go and try to run Java program, there is a component called as verifier. And this verifier component verifies whether there is change in the code or not. Because you know what is virus? Virus is something which is like adding extra instructions in the code, right? So verifier verifies the validity of code. I will tell you in next session how actually internally it is done, but it verifies the validity of code, and it is passed on to executor only if verifier passes it. If verifier rejects it, forget, that code will not get executed at all. And if that code will not get executed, there is no question of virus affecting your systems. Apart from this, in order to make Java a language where it can be used as implementing security for its components from unauthorized users, Java actually from version itself provided security API, where the security API was used in order to write message digest, not only that, signatures, right? And various other implementations in order to ensure that you can secure your code from unauthorized users and unauthorized external access. Okay? Is that clear? So agreed, Java is secure. Is that clear? Fine. So if you see, Java is secure now. These are 4 important features of Java. One is platform independent, then compression decompression, then supports WWW, and then 4th one is Java is secure. Okay. Now, another important feature which was added to already you say good features of Java was James Gosling thought that we have to adopt best possible principles of coding, right? So they made Java object oriented. It means Java follows what? Object oriented. So Java is an object oriented language. If Java is object oriented language, it means that you are using best practices or best programming principles, right? But Java, like James Gosling thought that C++ is also object oriented, right? But people actually get frustrated when we talk about C++ and its pointers and its level inheritance and all. So James Gosling thought we will keep this language simple, right? Now, so I'll write here Java is simple. What makes Java simple? Very important. No pointers need to be handled programmatically. It means developers need not bother about pointers, right? They need not worry about pointers because pointers are internally managed. Right? So now if you have to write a program for linked list or doubly linked list or using various data structures, your life will be simple. Right? Because you need not think about pointers at all. Pointers are internally managed by your JVM, which is called as Java Virtual Machine. Right? So these are 6 important features which makes Java an obvious choice to be used in order to write various type of applications. Right? Using Java, you can write almost all different type of applications, which starts with console applications, followed by Windows applications, followed by web applications, followed by distributed applications, followed by integration applications, followed by device programming as well, where you can specifically write applications for mobile and set-top boxes, right? So this is what is capability of Java. And if you see today's market, almost 70 to 75% of enterprise market is with Java, right? So you can say when it comes to distributed components, distributed application development, Java is far ahead as compared to other languages or other environments. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes.
Fine. So these are important features of Java. We'll keep on adding these features as we move forward. Now time has come where I have to go and discuss with you writing Java program. Right? But before we start writing Java program, what actually is program? People will say program is a set of instructions. I also agree. Now, what is instruction? Instruction is actually combination of two things. One is opcode and second is operand. Now, what is this opcode and what is operand? Operand is data and opcode is, you can say, code for operation. Because basic objective of any program is to work on data and to create information out of that data, right? Or to help manipulation of their data quickly with accuracy, right? That is what is objective of programming. So instruction is actually combination of opcode and operand, right? Now, why actually opcode is dependent on operand? Because very simple. If I say, can I multiply two names? Can we multiply two names? No, right? We can multiply two numbers, but not two names. So once you are able to identify the operand, that is data, you will be able to also identify what all operations can be done on that particular data depending on nature of the data. Okay? Right? So our focus in upcoming sessions will be how actually data and opcodes or operands or you say operations are identified keeping in mind a particular use case, right? So that is what will be our objective. But just to start up, I told you that program is a collection of instructions and instruction is combination of opcode and operand. Okay? Where operand is data and opcode is operation. Right? Fine. Now, how to write Java program? Any editor. You can use any editor to write Java program. It's not necessary that you need to go and download some big application in order to help you in writing Java program. Java provides you simplicity. Java talks about platform independence. So you can use any editor, whether it is Notepad or whether it is TextMate, which I'm using, or whether it is a VI editor, VIM editor of Linux, or it is gedit editor of Ubuntu, right? You can use any editor in order to write your Java program, right? What is structure of Java program? Typical structure of Java program. Structure of Java program. See, when we talk about structure of Java program, Java is purely object oriented. So you cannot write even a single line of instruction outside class. Right? So let me go ahead and write a small program to you so that you can see the cycle of writing the program. So as I told you, Java is purely object oriented. So you need to ensure that you have class. Now, whatever instruction you will write in opening and closing of it. I'm going and I'm writing here. I'll write instruction. Now, please understand that similar to C++ programs, all your statements need to be written in a method. Method is nothing but it's a function, right? There is a special function in Java as well. Like in C, you have main. In Java also you have something called as public static void main. Don't worry. In upcoming session, you will understand each and every keyword here that I'm specifying. Right. So this is what is the method which is actually located by your executor. So when I will ask my executor, Java executor, to execute a program, first thing that it will do is it will go and look for public static void main with the same signature. If it will not get, it will tell you clearly, I'm not able to get the main method. But as soon as it gets it, it will go and execute the program. Let me write a simple program here in order to print data out. So I'm writing here println, and here I'll write some message. Welcome to Java, and I'll just go and save it. Right? How many of you know Java? Core Java, I mean to say. Sanjeev, you know, right? In your introduction, I heard. Hello? Are you there? Yeah. So, what should be the name of the file?
Anything .java, text.java.
Okay. So here I will take anything .java. Now, objective of this 5 minutes of discussion is to find the relation between class name and file name. So as Sanjeev told me that you can write anything .java, I wrote anything .java. I'll just go and save it.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's
Hello? I think you're far from your mic, so.
Oh, sorry. Actually, this won't work. You have to have test 101. It should be the same name as the class.
Okay, so now let's write here what Sanjeev is saying. Sanjeev is saying that now it will not work. Name of the file should be similar to name of the class. Am I right, Sanjeev?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Right, everyone agrees? I'm not asking people who are first time looking at Java, but yes. Okay, so let's go and see this assumption works fine or not. I'll just go to my desktop. I'll save it. On desktop only I'll save. I'll go to my terminal here. You can open your own command prompt. Don't worry. All this installation part also will be covered. I'll just go to others. Here I have my terminal. Now this is what is the terminal which I have opened. I'll move to desktop. I'll just see. I have anything.java here. I'll go and I'll compile it. Java C anything.java. I'll press enter. Now, as soon as I use this, Java C is nothing but it is compiler that helps you to compile this program. Sanjeev, if you see code got compiled, it means your compiler is not bothered as of now about what is name of the class and what is name of the file, right? Right? Now let me go and show you. I want to run now. In order to run, I'll be using interpreter, which is Java, right?
Yeah.
And I'll write here anything. I press enter. It tells us what? It tells I am not able to load or find main class, right? Anything. Now what I'll do, I'll use here Java test 101 and I'll press enter. We got what? Hello, welcome to Java, right? Now it means that as of now, your compiler is not bothered about checking the name of the file and finding out that name should be similar to name of the class. But yes, when you go and do ls here, test after compilation, file which gets created is test101.class. It means what will be the name of the bytecode? This is your bytecode. It contains your compiled code. It contains your object code. So what will be name of the object code? It will be similar to name of the class, right? So irrespective of you are saving the file with whatever name, after compilation, when bytecode gets generated, its name is entirely similar to name of the class, right? Is that clear?
Yes.
So our first conclusion is what? Name of file and name of class. Doesn't matter. Right? This is comment double slash. Now what I will do, I will just go and make this class public. Right? Just remember public. I have made this class public. Now I'm saving it. Now again I'll go and I'll try to compile. What it says? It says class test101 is public. It should be declared in a file named test101. Right? Now Java compiler checks the name of the class and name of the file, right?
Yeah.
And what made it check? Public, right?
Public access. Yeah.
So what I'll write here, name of the file and name of the class doesn't matter, right? But if class is public, name of file must be similar to name of class, right? Now this makes the correct sense, correct statement. Name of the file and class doesn't matter, but if class is public, name of the file must be similar to name of the class. Is that clear?
Yeah.
You'll remember this rule now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now other question, how many classes I can have in a single Java file? For example, I'll write here another class. See, class test 102. And this 102 has its own main method. I'll just go here, copy this, come here, paste it. I'll just write here, different message. I'll save it. Right? I'll remove this public from here. Now, our check is one Java file can have how many classes? I'll go here. Now I'll compile. It compiles because I have removed public from here. Now let's go and see how many test bytecodes are generated. If you see, you have how many? 2, right? Test 101, test 102. Right? It means one Java file can have multiple classes. And when you compile it for each class, it will generate what? Separate bytecode, right? Different class file. Okay. Is that clear? So for this, if you see, you have this class file, and for this you see, you have this class file. Now I want to run. In order to run, what I'll do, I'll write here Java test 101, and then I'll write Java. I'll just move it. Java test 102, right? So it means one Java file can have multiple classes, right? And for each class, a different bytecode will be generated, which will be stored in their respective .class files. Is that fine?
Yeah.
But what about if I go and make public? How many public classes can be there in a single Java? Let me save it now. I'll save it as test101.java in order to ensure that it compiles. Now since class is public, I'll just go to command line. I'll write Java C test101.java. Code gets compiled. You just go and see test star. Sorry. Right, you have here test101 class, and now again I will go and run it. First I executed this, and then I executed this. Both are executing, there is no issue because I have changed the name of the file to be test101.java. Now I'll go and I will make this class also as public. Now when I make this class as public, fight starts, right? Because what should be name of the file now? Because I have now two classes with public. of type public. Let's go and try compiling it. Java C test101.java. Now test102 will complain that no, name of the file should be test102. It means you can have only one public class, right? In a single Java file. Is that clear?
Yeah.
The second important thing that we have to note here is one Java file can have multiple classes, right? Name of the Java file must be similar to name of public class, right? And you need to remember always one Java file will have only one public class, right? The rest of them must be non-public. It's clear?
Yes.
So any confusion when it comes to what should be the name of the file when you write Java program?
No.
Okay, good. Now let's move and take up another important aspect here, right? And I'll ask a simple question. 10 is a number, right? Divided by 2. If I run this, what will be output? If I go and compile it first, anytime you make change to your Java program, right, you have to go and compile it first. That's what we are doing. We are compiling it. Compilation done. Now I'm running Java test101. What will be output? 5, right? Now, if I go and if I change it to 0, Sanjeev, what will be output?
Number not defined.
Number is defined.
10 divided by 0 though.
Yeah, so it means that internally your interpreter has capability of arithmetic evaluations, right? It is aware about what need to be done when a particular symbol is used. Now I'll go and I'll compile it. There is no problem in compilation, but when I run it, as Sanjeev said, it will say I cannot divide it by 0 because in my arithmetic, I have a constraint, and that constraint is whenever anyone is trying to write an instruction where he's trying to divide a number by 0, generate an exception. Okay, and this is what is generated.